All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rukah Kodash.
All right.
Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is E Try to Erase History. Job chapter 13, verse 4. But ye are forgers of lies, ye are all physicians of no value. The word for forgers is the Hebrew word tapal, which means to smear, plaster over, stick, glue. In the case of what Esau also did was hide or try to erase certain histories and records so that the world would not find out who they are and who the true Israelites are. I've been kind of, glancing over this book that I spoke about in the live yesterday called The 10 Tribes of Israel, historically identified with the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere by Barbara Ann Simon. And pretty much, when it comes to a woman, they could get wordy, So I was trying to read some of the book, but it was just too much, just too many unnecessary things said. But nevertheless, it's her book, so I guess she's gonna write it how she sees it. But nevertheless, she hit certain points because this book was given to me by a brother in the San Fran. He is actually in the audience. He's been in the audience for at least 2 years or so, if I'm not mistaken. And he gave me this book. So he had actually read through it. I'm not sure if he read the whole thing or just read through certain chapters and highlighted a few points for me. So I just decided to go to the highlights because, I kind of see, the Spirit had him do like the reading through that verbal diarrhea to get to the good stuff. Nevertheless, I want to start off with this before we get into that. I put this in the description box. I also put the PDF file of this particular book in the description box in case anybody wanted to read it. This is called Codices Burned by the Conquistadors. Now, codices was another name for the records of, the Maya, which are Issacharites. It says the ancient Maya civilization, known for its remarkable achievements in writing, astronomy, and art, crafted a wealth of knowledge in the form of codices, folded books, much from bark paper, because it goes back to what? To the scrolls. So when the conquistadors came here, they came here looking for the barbarians to be able to steal their gold and silver and their resources. But they couldn't do that if you had a people that had written records, they had order established, they had kings over them, nobles, they had the people subordinated, they had the they had a established government, people didn't starve, they ate, the leader would take care of the people, have officers that would take care of the people, so you couldn't justify calling these people savages, and that's why they burned the books. It says these codices contain intricate hieroglyphics. Or before we read on, it spoke about astronomy, right? Let's get real quick. First Chronicles 12 and 32. And of the children of Issachar, which the Maya are children of Issachar, the so-called Mexican that were here, that were inhabiting the southern half of the so-called America of so-called North America, those are the children of Issachar, who the conquistadors, encountered in the 1500s. The first place they conquered was the island of Hispaniola, today known as Dominican Republic in Haiti, in 1492 and upwards. and eventually they made their way through the different islands, and eventually made their way in the 1500s onto the mainland, beginning with I believe they started in Florida, Ponce de Leon, and the Spanish had this armor on, that hard metal armor. So the weapons that Jake had when they got here were primitive weapons, so they were not able to fight against the type of weapons that the armor that the conquistadors brought. But Reuben, on the island of, or on the peninsula of Florida, they had armor piercing arrows, and that's how they got that devil. The arrow pierced right through his armor, and he got hit, and that was it. But nevertheless, those devils continued to conquer the what they call the New World and what they call the savages. Okay, so it says, and of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, because they were able to look up. They knew when the moon phases were changing. They knew when one month was ending and a new month was coming in by following the moon, and they knew how to read the stars. All right. And then it says to know what Israel ought to do. Right. So they had the understanding of the times, because you didn't have calendars back then. The calendar were the observers of the heavens, the tribe of Issachar, that would look up in the stars and look up in the sun and the moon and all that, and let Israel know the times and what time we're coming. Okay, we're coming into the first week, or we're coming into the second week of the month. This particular month is the first month, so we're getting ready to prepare for the Passover, and so on and so forth. So they were observers of time to let Israel know what they ought to do. And that's what we're reading here, that they had records, and in these records they wrote about astronomy. They had arts and crafts and all these different things, right? It says the codices contain intricate hieroglyphics that chronicled everything from religious rituals to historical events. Now I'm wondering if those hieroglyphics were actually Hebrew writings, and they just called it hieroglyphics. But I'm not sure if they have any remaining. I know Lord Viscount, which I spoke about briefly yesterday, he gave a testimony, and he had some receipts that he had brought with him to be able to show, have proof of what a lot of these people were saying, because the conquistadors burnt the majority of the records. All right. So it says, Salaki for a minute. Why is this thing not working? Oh, well. Anyways, it says, as a vital link to understanding the Maya worldview and their sophisticated society. However, the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century marked a tragic turning point in this narrative, as many of these invaluable texts were lost forever, consumed by flames in a bid to erase the indigenous cultures and its beliefs. Because that's exactly what they wanted to do. Now let me see. Right. So that was okay. That's what it was. I got it. So that's what they did. They wanted to erase that. And then when you type in on your regular Google search, did the conquistadors burn the records of the indigenous people in America? It'll tell you yes, because they wanted to get rid of it, because they wanted to have them embrace Christianity, blah blah, which is bullshit. They did it because they wanted to erase the history of these people, because they knew that they were the 10 lost tribes of the nation of Israel, as we read here in Job 13:4, that they are forgers of lies. And the word forgers is topal, which means to smear, plaster over, stick, glue. So what did they do? They erased the true history and put you know, their own spin on it. And that's why it says they are forgers of lies. And they have forged these lies. Let's look up the word lies. The word lies is the word shaquar. It says lie, deception, disappointment, falsehood. Because this is, you got to understand that during this time, this was at the peak, you know, or the rise of the Renaissance period. So they had to get rid of any records or documentation that had, Jake. When I mean Jake, I'm talking about the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, in a light to be Israelites, because they were telling the world that they are Israelites, because they came in and took over people's lands, renamed the lands, put the people in captivity, and in some certain cases took over the customs, traditions, and nationalities of these peoples, and labeled them something different. Um, so let's read this again. Job 13:4. But you are forgers of lies, you are all physicians of no value. And that's a whole another topic right there. So let's see what we got. You can read through this. Here we go. It says the destruction of the Maya codices was not merely an act of war, but a systematic effort to obliterate a civilization's heritage. Why? Because they saw that they were Israelites. With each burning, a piece of history vanished, taking with it the accumulated wisdom and traditions of the Maya. This article delves into the historical context surrounding these lost books, examining the significance of the codices, the impact of the conquistadors, and the key figures involved in their destruction. It further explores modern efforts to recover and understand the fragments of knowledge that survived, ensuring that the legacy of the Maya endures even in the face of such cultural annihilation. All right, so I'm not going to jump into it right now. I'm going to go to the book, close the book, close the book, close the book. So this is the actual book, this book right here, the 10 tribes of Israel. This is the PDF. I put this in the description box. And this is the very first page here, which goes into, it's called Notice of the Antiquities of Mexico. So it says, to the antiquities of Mexico, the following pages are indebted for the most valuable portion of the testimony by which they are enriched. This race and costly compilation, which was a few years ago published by the Right Honorable Lord Viscount Kingsborough. Yeah, he had I believe it was an 8-volume set of books, which he documented the history of Issachar and tied them to the Israelites, has hitherto been little known beyond the libraries of universities and those of a few noblemen. Why? Because they don't want this information out. Too late. The Antiquities of Mexico at the present time consist of 7 folio volumes, which with the exception of the 6th, contain facsimiles and drawings from such historical remains. Okay, so he actually copied, some of the records, because a facsimile is a copy. So he copied some of the records. He doesn't have the actual records, but he copied some of the records, and that's why they survived. As had escaped the destruction to which all the primitive records and other memorials of the tribes of the new continent had been condemned by the policy of their invaders in the 15th century. Why? Because you can't justify calling people barbarians if they have records, if they have order. They would make you believe back then that they were savages. They were in the jungle. They were killing each other. They were eating each other. They were just all messed up until we tamed them and gave them the white Jesus. God damn. It says, as had escaped the destruction to which all the primitive records. Okay, I read that part. Librarian and and antiquarian travelers, having from time to time transmitted these precious relics to their respective governments, they have been preserved, see, in the royal libraries of Paris. These are prestigious places. Berlin, Dresden, the Imperial Library of Vienna, the Vatican Library. So even in the Vatican Library, they have some of these records that they're not going to reveal to the public. Anything that has remained, that has the proof. So they know. That's why we tell you, like the higher ups, they know. Because remember, we read, what was it? Was it in this? No. I believe it was in this one here, where it spoke about the nobleman. It's either here or in this one that I'm reading here. Yeah, right here, the nobleman. So it's top-notch individuals that know this information, not your average everyday clown on the street, Edomite on the street, or so-called Edomite Christian, or whatever the case. They don't know shit. This is why they keep talking shit, that we're not the Israelites, and no, that's not true, and blah, blah, blah. You don't know shit. You don't have the records. The Lord revealed it to us. And that's why, the story that was told us years ago about an individual, it was either one or two, that pulled up to the camp. I believe it was on 44th Street, if I'm not mistaken. And he got out of the limo, read the 12 tribe sign, and asked them, how did they find this out? They spent millions of dollars hiding this information. How did you find this out? You see? And I believe that. I believe that actually happened, because that's how these devils operate. You don't get it. Just like High Priest Ariah years ago said that he was breaking down the book of Revelation and the seven heads, and it was his Edomite. He said the Edomite was pretty intelligent Edomite, and as he was breaking it down, I believe he said the Edomite said they should burn that book or something like that, because it brings out the information. And these devils that are higher ups, they know that what we're saying is the truth. Because if you believe that what we're saying is madness, why would you spend so much money, effort, resources, and time trying to debunk what we say if we're just a bunch of madmen? You don't do that to the Egyptologists, to the Black conscious community. You don't do that to Islam, the FOI, the NOI. You don't do that to Catholicism or Christianity, which is one and the same. So what's so damaging, or what's so what's the word I'm looking for? What are you scared of? What are you scared? What are you scared of? If we just these quacks, why are you so concerned with the quacks? This is Psalm chapter 50, verse 21. It says, these things hast thou done, and I kept silence. Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such an one as thyself, because you, after a while, you really thought, you know what? Well, maybe God is one of us. Maybe he is on our side. Because the Most High ain't jack your ass up for what you did to us. But I will reprove thee in the house. He reproving you by sending the prophets out here and telling you what it is, and set them in order before thine eyes. And that's what's happening. The Israelites are being set in order before your eyes, and your whole plan of deception is unraveling, but you're still trying to save face. And you're only going to get the ones the Lord doesn't want. And that's the bottom line. Scripture say, if at all possible, they will deceive the very elect. But the point is, you cannot deceive the very elect, because the Lord has a seal in them that will not allow your lies to get through it. See? And that's what you don't count on, because you Edomites, you're carnal. You're not a spiritual people. You are a carnal people, and you think that through your carnality you can control everything. You think you could continue to pay people off. You think everybody is motivated by money, and that's not the case. Everybody's not motivated by money or tangible things. You know, it says, "Thou givest thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit." See, and that's why I just that just caught my eye. Your tongue frameth deceit, which goes hand in hand with you are forgers of lies. Thy tongue frameth. The word there is Imad, which Tazamad, Salaki, not Imad. Imad means to stand. That's Tazamad. To bind, join, fasten, to join or attach oneself to be fastened, to be bound, to combine, fit together, hitch up. Says, "Thou givest thy mouth to evil, thy tongue frameth deceit." So you frame deceit. And as it says in St. John 8:44, when you speak a lie, you speak of your own. Now that was the Lord speaking to them wicked Israelites back then, but that applies to you too, because he was talking about you. That you were their father, the father of lies. You are the father of lies, you Edomites. And right now you're in the power seat. You know, Voltaire said it best. He said, history is a lie commonly agreed upon. And you've paid off a lot of people to push your lies, but the lies are coming to an end. So you have this shit ain't worth a damn today. All right, so your lies ain't working anymore. And all of these different places have these so-called prestigious places. They have the records of these encounters in the museum at Rome, in the library of the Institute of Bologna, and in the Bodleian Library, Oxford. So these are prestigious places, you know, that they have these records. And the average person, you know, out there is not privy to a lot of these things. They're not able to just go up into the Vatican Library and research this stuff and read about this stuff. You have to have a certain prestige about you. You know, you have to have a certain, you know, pass, so to speak. So as a specimen of genius of a primitive race over whose origin has long brooded a mysterious obscurity, and as a successful attainment in the antiquarian research, the publication of Viscount Kingsborough, which actually is 7, I thought it was 8, is highly interesting and curious, but rising as it does to the sublime character of an illustration and confirmation of scripture testimony in disclosing the Hebrew origin, history, experience, and genius of the grand division of the Hebrew nation, which, although cut off for a series of ages from their own and the nations of the earth, have nevertheless occupied a prominent place in the prophetic pages. The importance of such testimony at such an ominous crisis in the history of Christendom, so miraculously preserved, so long withheld. Yeah, because the truth has been so long without fruit. Let's get that real quick. Because there's something else that he said in there that brought to mind a scripture that woman even put at the beginning of her of the introduction of this book. Let me just get this precept, hold it on deck, and then let me get that real quick, because I'm not sure exactly what page it is. Let's see. I'm gonna look in the book form itself to see. Like I said, it was some very good points in this book, but it's like a lot of fucking word salad. It's actually. No, let me see something. Just bear with me. Yep, it's like in the it's between the table of is after the table of contents and just before this page right here that we're reading about the notice of the antiquities of Mexico. It says, "Behold, I was left alone. These where had they been?" So this was a precept off of a longer precept, or a line off of a longer precept. in the scripture. Matter of fact, you know what? Let me bring this over here. In the book of Isaiah, and this was bad. I was like, wow. Isaiah 49 and 21, right? It says, then shalt thou say in thine heart, who hath begotten me these? Seeing I have lost my children, right? Because what happened? Eventually, the nation of Israel was pushed out of the land of Israel. But the first ones that went were the northern kingdom. It says, and am desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro. Yeah, because all nations had that land. And all nations had a hand in putting the Israelites in captivity. Right? And who hath brought up these? Talking about who? The Israelites. Behold, I was left alone. These, meaning the Israelites, where had they been? See? Because you had the 10 tribes that were all the way over here on this side of the world, while the other 3 tribes and a sprinkle of the 10 that were left among them were bouncing from captivity to captivity. You see? So these, where had they been? You know, that I was like, wow, that's a, you know, they just focus on that last part. I was left alone. These, where had they been? That's why Yahushua said it best. Let's go real quick to St. John chapter 10 and verse 15. As the Father knoweth, as the Father knoweth me, even so I know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Right, because where did they go? Where had they been? They were over here on the other side of the world. What Esau called the new world when they came over here. Which is not a new world, it's just a part of the old world. It had just drifted because of the flood. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice. See how? By the words, through the internet. They shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Because you're going to have the house of David coming back together. That one shepherd is King David underneath Yahushua. Because Yahushua is the ultimate shepherd, the ultimate door to the sheepfold, to the sheep house. All right? So let's go back. It says, so unexpectedly reclaimed. Let me see. So miraculously preserved, so long withheld. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to get. 2 Ezra 6 and 28. As for faith, it shall flourish. Corruption shall be overcome. Why? Because the devil, when he first got out of his prison sentence, the first thing he did was lie and deceive the whole world. Now those lies are being, turned back the right way. And they can't stand it. And the worst part about it for them is not just that the truth is coming out, because that's horrific to them, but the main part that is so appalling to them is that they look at us as nothings. You ain't got no documentation. You ain't got no certificates. You ain't got no diplomas. You ain't got no titles of nobility in this society. Who the hell are you to break the scriptures down like that? Yeah, well, the Lord said he chose the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. It says, and the truth, which has been so long without fruit, shall be declared. And that's what's happening right now. So they withheld it, and the Most High released it. So it says, so miraculously preserved, so long withheld, so unexpectedly reclaimed, whether in its internal or relative character, like the bow of peace and promise, speaks of a place and state of rest beyond the impending cloud of retributive storm. Yeah, because eventually the Lord is going to give us, retribution. He's going to allow us to get vengeance on our enemies, and the vengeance is going to be done by our hands. When the kingdom is established. You know, the Lord said, I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel. All right. So I'm gonna have to keep referring back to this book because the pages on here, for some reason, are a little different than the numbering here. So I have to make reference to the book to find out the exact location. Because this is, I don't even know what this says, page 44 down there, but here it doesn't give a page. But we're going to read here those early Spanish writers. This is on preliminary notices of Spanish historians. These are Spanish, the conquistadors that came here that were, some of them were Roman, the Roman Catholics. Some of them were writers, historians, and they were writing about the encounters that they had with the natives of this inhabited lands. Right? It says those early Spanish writers unanimously recognize and acknowledge the manifold analogies which demonstrate the transference of the Levitical economy to the new continent. But while some of them discerned in this circumstance an undisputable proof of the Hebrew origin of the newly discovered people. And what do the scriptures say? Huh? Well, do you have records? Do you have genealogical records that prove that you are the Israelites? And yes, the Bible. How about that? The Spirit. How about that? Things that you don't understand. How about that? Carnality will not gain spirituality. So like Romans 8 and 16. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. And that's why you see that these devils, when they came here, they looked at these people, the customs, the mannerisms, the language, the way they interacted with each other, and they said, these are Hebrews. But how can it be that these people could be Hebrews and Israelites if they were over here? How did they know these things? Because they were brought over here. They came over here to get away from the Assyrian captivity. Because the Assyrian captivity back then was hell. Them Assyrians are putting hell on people. So Jake got together, came to this side of the world with the idea to worship the Most High. Salakia. Keep the law, statutes, and commandments, which they never kept in the land when they were there. And that's the reason why they got kicked out. You see? It says, Satan. Others accounted for this almost facsimile resemblance by asserting that Satan had counterfeited in this people. So they were so appalled that they said, no, Satan did this. This is the work of the devil. That's why these people are like that, because Satan converted them. First of all, that's some bullshit, okay? Satan works for the Most High. All right? It says, whom he had chosen for himself. The history, manners, customs, traditions, and expectation of the Hebrews, in order that their minds might thus be rendered inaccessible to the faith which he foresaw the church would in due time introduce amongst them. So they made up this bullshit lie that Satan deceived them, made them think that they were Israelites so that they couldn't be indoctrinated back to the true faith of the Roman Catholic Church, the Romish, ways. Let's see what else we got. All right, so we're going to jump to this is page 46 there. Yep. Now this is account from Don Bartolome de las Casas. He was a friar, I believe, for the Roman Catholic Church that wrote about the injustices, of the Indies. He saw the maltreatment, and he was documenting these things of all the heinous crimes that the conquistadors were doing. And matter of fact, before we continue on, let's go to Jeremiah 49. Because the conquistadors, you so-called white people, you are Edomites. But not every so-called white looking person is an Edomite. It depends on where the line goes back to. Because if your father was an Elamite, meaning an East Indian, then you are an Elamite, even though you might look like a white person. Because remember, Esau, they mixed, and the nations mixed with Esau too. You have Moabites and Ammonites that mixed with Edomites, and some of them babies look like, yellow, the chinky eyes, but they're Edomites. And some of them that look like Edomites that may have Moabitish or Ammonitish fathers, they're Moab or Ammon. Depends. You see? And some of them might look like white people, straight up. Might have the white eyes. So Jeremiah 49:12, for thus saith Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup have assuredly drunken. Meaning the Israelites, we drank. And boy, did we drink that cup. It says, and art thou he, you Edomites, that shall altogether go unpunished? So we are the apple of the Most High's eye. And the Lord put such devastating hell on us. Do you think you're going to go unpunished and you are the wicked, the one that the Most High hates? The one that he loved, he kicked our ass, just totally, pretty much demolished us, brought us down to nothing. And you think that he hates, that you're going to get away with it? You're just going to skate off into the sunset. All you got to do is say you believe in Jesus and that's it. And you're good. Nah. Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink of it. You are going into captivity. You will catch hell. All you got to do is go back to everything that you've done to us since you've been in power and rulership. And that's what you got to look forward to, but double. So this is preliminary notices of Spanish historians, Don Bartolomé Las Casas, that Las Casas was firmly persuaded that the Indians were descended from the Hebrews, is evident from his own words, lo que la tua manifestum de fecit. He said this is the scripture that was told to Peter, your speech betrays you, or bewrayeth you, as recorded by Torquemada. So basically, your speech bewrayeth you, like the things that you're saying, your language, the words that come out of your mouth, they all convey Hebrew Israelite customs. So how did these people know these things? If the work of the illustrious prelate, who was intimately acquainted with Columbus, whose life he wrote, and who was one of the first Spaniards who proceeded to the continent of America, where he must have had an opportunity of becoming acquainted with the traditions, etc., had ever been published, we should have known his reasons for coming to the conclusion that Bishop was too rational to adopt the hypothesis embraced by Acosta and Torquemada that the devil had actually counterfeited the history. And this is what the devil does when something don't go his way, or you find out the truth, they try to demonize you. That's why I said that they're forgers of lies. It says laws, rites, ceremonies, and customs of the Jews in the New World. But he believed that the Hebrews had colonized America, and they did. But it was the Northern Kingdom. And when you go to the Apocrypha, which gives you, the records of it, that's how they got to this side of the world. All right? And Lord's will, we're going to get to that if the Spirit allows. Let me see if I can find the next one. Oh, yeah, this is it. This is it. All right, so let me see if I can find this. Bernard de Sahagún. Just bear with me right quick. All right, that's the Bernard de Sahagún. So let's go to the following page. And we're going to go to the part that's all right. The Archbishop says in a note subjoined to Montezuma's speech, los mexicanos por tradiciones vinieron por el norte de la provincia de Quevedo y se luben ciertamente sus mansiones. Let's see. This information he perhaps obtained from the examination of some of the confiscated papers of Boturini, which remained in Mexico. This one's, let's see. I think I might have to go up just a little bit more than that. Okay. All right, here. That America, let's just start here, would have derived some instruction from the personal perusal of the history of Sahagún, and certainly would not have assumed it as an undeniable fact that America had never been colonized from the northwest. Neither would he have put a different construction on the passage of the speech of Montezuma to Cortez, where he declares that his ancestors were from the east. Woo! His ancestors were from the east. That's exactly where they were from. Then the words of the monarch fairly admit. And that was it, right? Yep. And let me see this one more here. This is, man, you know what? This goes into something else, so which is good. These devils, they were trying to erase everything. So let me see. Okay. All right. So let me just leave it there just in case. But let's get to this real quick. Let's go to 2nd Ezra chapter 13 in the Apocrypha. And this is why they'll tell you the Apocrypha is not canonical, it's not accepted text, it's not, it's just, it's just whatever they say it is. Well, these are records. And they don't want these records out. And that's why they hate the Apocrypha, because the Apocrypha is explicit. And without the Apocrypha, you would not know the history of how the Israelites became Hellenized or made to be so-called Greeks. And that's what that. And if you understand that history and know that history, you'll get a better understanding of the New Testament and why it speaks about the salvation of the Gentiles. And there's no difference between a Jew and a Greek, because they're all Israelites. Bottom line. All right, 2nd Ezra 13 and 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes. So in order for you, those of you that are new to this, that are not really familiar with that history, you would have to go back. You should be able to start off at 1 Kings, I believe it is, the 11th chapter, where King Solomon, when he got older, all the women that he married, he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Those concubines turned his heart away from the Lord, and he started to build temples and worship the gods of these nations. And the Lord got upset. So from that point on, the Lord made uh, um, a division among the nation of Israel, and it was broken into two nations at that point. So, but you have to go back and read that history. It says, which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, because Hosea, which was an Ephraimite king, he was the last king of the northern kingdom before it was removed and brought in captivity over to Assyria. And this is why when you read the book of Tobit, which is in the Apocrypha also, Tobit was of the tribe of Naphtali, and he happened to be one of the families that was taken out and taken captive to Assyria. It says, whom Salmanassar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. And what was this other land? This was the land of Assyria. All right, and you can read about that in the 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. And that's over here on this side of the world. Now, you may say, how did they know about this land? Well, King Solomon, which had a navy, also had someone named Hiram, which was a Canaanite, that also had seafaring men, the Sidonians. And they were experts in navigating the seas, and they knew about all the different continents and everywhere, because they traveled. So every 3 years he would send them, and they will go out to the so-called Americas, land of Ophir, and go and bring different exotic animals. They would bring trees and different exotic fruits, and bring them back over to the other side of the world. And this is how the Israelites from the northern kingdom knew that this side of the world existed. So they said, look, we got to do something so we can get over to that side of the world, and that way we could be free from these heathens and be able to worship the Lord in peace, which they did at the beginning. But eventually things went south, because even when them devils got here, they saw that Jake was still worshiping idols and things of that nature, like dealing with Ephraim. And I'm not sure what the different islands that it was on, but Ephraim had something called the Semis, which is Zemi. You can put an S at the end. S makes it plural. And I think some people spell it with an S. And those are little miniature gods. And today, when you well, not so much as today, because this younger generation is, but the older generations going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they will have a shrine of so-called saints, and that's what the scriptures say. Ephraim is joined to idol, let him thus alone. So they did still go off, but they still had remains of their Israelite heritage. And that's what the Spaniards encountered when they got here. And that's why they were so adamant in trying to get rid of it, because you cannot justify putting the people in captivity and calling them barbarians if they have a written language. How can somebody have written languages and be a savage? How can somebody have written records and be savages? How can somebody be established, as a society with leaders and other and kings and leaders under them, and having a government and things running properly, and an agriculture and all that, if they're savages? That's what these devils did. It says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. Right. So they got into ships. That's how they got into this. They got into the river. They got into ships, and they navigated down towards what today's called the Persian Gulf, and dumped out into the Indian Ocean, because that was another way to go around. You had the Red Sea. You had the Gulf of Aqaba, and you had the Gulf of Suez. The Gulf of Aqaba would be more towards the east. And at the top of the Gulf of Aqaba, you had something called Eziar Gabur or Ezion Gabar, and there was um, a post, a seaport there where King Solomon had a navy, and that or he had a ship men that were shipmasters, and they would from that point on go down, and that's how they knew how to get around, because the Euphrates River, which dumps into the Persian Gulf, which dumps into the Indian Ocean, leads you right into that area, and there are currents that if you're not an expert navigator, you won't know how to ride those currents, because you could get effed up out there. So that's how they rode the currents down underneath the bottom of Africa, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and came to this side of the world. They could have landed first, in Brazil, because the continent of so-called South America sticks out at the top. So they could have stopped there, or some of them could have stopped there, some of them could have kept going, or they could have just stopped there and migrated out, and eventually ended up on the islands and all the way up to what they call Canada, North America, so on and so forth. All right. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over, right? Because there are a lot of storms and a lot of cyclones and different things that happen out there, on them waters, on them open seas and oceans. So the Lord kept that still. Why? Because they had to make it to this side of the world in order for the Lord to be able to save them later on, because some of them were a part of the elect. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. See, so it took a year and a half to get from that side of the world to this side of the world, because you have individuals out there that'll say the 10 lost tribes, they went around the area of Georgia, Russia, and there, or they went to other places. It don't take no fucking year and a half to get from Assyria to that region there. All right. But it will take a year and a half to get to this side of the world. Why? Because King Solomon, which had a navy, which had, servants, Sidonians, every 3 years they will come to this side of the world and come back. A year and a half there, a year and a half back. Easy. It's easy. It says, and the same region is called Arsareth, which means another land. Achar Arataza. I think it's Achar. Achar Arataza. Another land, another earth. Then dwelt they there until what? The latter time. And then when did the latter times really begin? When the southern kingdom, the 3 tribes predominantly, were brought over to this side of the world during the time of the transatlantic slave trade. That began because that was the first time when Jake was coming here, and eventually certain Jakes that would run away, Reuben was taking them in, Gad was taking them in, So that was like a beginning of the union of the tribes being reunited once again after being away from each other for so long. It says, and now when they shall begin to come, meaning talking about the other 3 tribes over here, and we know how they got here, even though there's no proof, there's no ships, there's no slave ships, no remains of slave ships left, brother. And shut the fuck up. The highest shall stay the springs of the stream again, and that they may go through. Therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace, right? Because the Lord is bringing back the tribes, and that's what you see happening today. The house of David being rebuilt as it was in the old days, but not everyone is a part of the house of David. But those that be left behind of thy people are they that are found within my borders, right? Because the ones that were back there, the 3 tribes that were there, once the 10 tribes came over here, they caught hell over there. All right. Now, when he destroyed the multitude of the nations that are gathered together, it's dealing with Yahushai, he shall defend his people that remain, right? Because he's coming to bring destruction upon Esau. Once World War III is in full bloom, after they push the MOTB, he's going to come to destroy the Esau's armies and the nation's armies, and he's coming to deliver his elect off of the soils of Arsareth, or America, Babylon the Great. And then you have other Israelites that are around the world that are part of the elect that the Lord is going to also take up when that time comes. But the main deliverance is here in America. All right. So let's see what else we could glean off of this. Okay, so it says Sahagun, when engaged in the compilation of his history, after it had been taken away from him and again restored, received three cautions. First, to write nothing to prove that the Hebrews had colonized the New World, because he was convinced, just like others were convinced, but they did not want this information to come out. It says, secondly, to be guarded in what he said of the devils having imitated God and taken to himself a chosen people in the New World. Because that was the only way they could justify it. The only way, these savages, it was Satan. Satan did it. It's a counterfeit. He's a great counterfeit. And counterfeiting the rites and ceremonies of the Jews. It says, and thirdly, not to advance the hypothesis that Christianity had ever been proclaimed to the Indians, or to treat too largely on the history of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, or Kulkulkan, which means a feathered serpent. And this was something that was detrimental to them, because when they said, what? That Quetzalcoatl or Kulkulkan story sounds like the Lord, the Messiah. So they had to bury that. They try to bury you, Jack. Inside joke. All right. So they try to hide these things. But the Lord is the one that's turning everything right side up. That's why Spirit been having me read this scripture a lot the last few days. Isaiah 25:7. And even brothers been bringing it out. It says, and he, meaning the Most High Yahweh, will destroy in this mountain, meaning America, the face of the covering cast over all people, because the world has been deceived. The first thing that the beast did was deceive the people. It said, and the world wondered after the beast. They had the power to deceive. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, who is he? And the veil that is spread over all nations. So the Lord is causing the truth to prevail and peel back all of the layers of lies that Esau has pushed out here upon these nations and upon the Israelites. And he's making it plain for those that can see that the Lord has an ingredient of faith in to be able to see through the darkness that Esau has webbed out here. You see? Because it says, if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world has blinded the mind of them which believe not. So that's what happened. And how did they do that? Through Christianity, Roman Catholicism, painting themselves up as being the Most High, Yahweh Shai, the angels, the Israelites. You see? And that's why the world today doesn't know. But on the other hand, on the contrast of that, the truth is coming out. And it's a threat to them. Because threat to the international banking families, these Edomites, is not guns, it's not militaries, it's not resources, it's not riches. It's the truth. The truth is the most damaging thing to these devils. It's like garlic to a vampire. And whenever that happens, the best way that they know how to deal is to demonize people. Because if you demonize somebody, you'll be able to have the majority of people discount or not deal with or accept anything that they say, because their character has been tarnished. So why are you gonna believe this guy? He's a criminal. He's a this, he's a that, he's a quack. So that's why they try to discredit this thing. That's why they have plants and spies, coming into the different camps and doing stupid shit to try to make the whole, all of the Israelites look bad. You see? But you didn't count on the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai still having his elect, and still be the prophet still being out here and pushing the true message of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. You didn't count on that. Because your lies can't penetrate the minds and spirits of the elect. because the Lord has them sealed. And they seeing right through the bullshit. And no matter how much shit you throw, how many lies you throw, and how many people you pay off, or how many spies you send, they're not going to be swayed. Because they were given to Yahushai. And Yahushua said, out of all that you gave me, I lost none, save the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. See? So it's a waste of time, E. And there's, let me see, there's one more here. Let me get this one. The hell with it. I think this is the last one. Oh no, there's actually another one that the brother. So you know what? Let me. I think. Let's see. Okay, got that. Oh shit! I skipped this here. You know what? Let me go back here for a little bit. Let's see. Let me go back to the previous page. Okay, so we're getting close. Sargon. Okay. Just bear with me. Right here. Sahagun further complains that he was forcibly deprived of a very valuable painting representing the great temple with the court by which it was surrounded. Wow. That's dealing with the temple of Israel, which he says was sent to Spain. It is very evident that everything in Mexico calculated to draw attention to the ancient history of the country, more especially if connected with religious recollections, was carefully removed from notice immediately after the conquest. Pieces of sculpture were mutilated or buried. Paintings were burned. Temples and edifices, which from their size it was impossible to destroy, were suffered to fall into oblivion, and magnificent monuments of ancient art, such as the temples of Palenque and the palace of Mitlan, were passed unnoticed by Spanish authors. Right, they did that on purpose. Don't speak about this stuff. Write what we tell you to write. And man, there's so much here. You know, I'm gonna skip this one, but I'm gonna go to this one. I gotta read this last part at least. Let me see if I can find that one. Uh, mm-hmm. If I can't find this one, then I guess I'll leave it there. Let's see. Okay, think I got it. Let me see. Boom. The Peruvians. All right, getting there. Such. All right here. Such was the reserve the Spanish historians imposed upon themselves in treating of Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican Messiah, that his name, in fact, would scarcely have been handed down to us but for the preservation of a chance copy of the first edition of the Indian monarchy. See? By Torquemada. Again, it is evident that in Mexico, great pains were taken by the monks and the clergy to root out the remembrance of him. Because how can you justify savages in the New World and converting them to your bullshit religion, Christianity, when they already had a Messiah? How did they know about a Messiah? And legendary tales relating to his life were not allowed to be inserted in books published either in that city or in Spain. Why? What's so damaging about that? The temple of Cholula was dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. Bernal Diaz, in his history, declares that he had forgot the name of the idol to whom it was dedicated, although he remembers the number of steps which led up to the temple. Right. So how the fuck you forgot the name, right? But you remember how many steps? That's harder to remember the steps. How many steps, than to remember the name. This was either out of compliance with the wishes, and that's exactly what it was, or in obedience to the command of others, and that's exactly what it was. Because they threatened his ass. Bitch. Let's see. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna leave it there because but I'll read this again in Second Ezra 6, because you can't stop the truth, Esau. So Second Ezra 6:28. As for faith, it shall flourish, corruption shall be overcome, and the truth which has been so long without fruit shall be declared. And I'll leave you with this one, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 8. And then shall that wicked be revealed, and this is what we're going through, the revelation of the wicked, which are the Edomites, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, which are who? The prophets, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Because when Yahushua comes back, the missiles are going to be flying, and the lasers from the chariots are going to be scorching. Hosea 6:5. Therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and thy judgments are are as the light that goeth forth. So that's what we see are witnessing happening right now. In the world, the revelation of the wicked and their destruction soon to come. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say shalom.